some kids thought it was like balloons popping. Some other people thought it was like firecrackers or something. We didn't really know what it was. But in the back of my head, I was like, is it a school and then I was like, no, it can't be. It can't be.
Welcome back to Other People's Lives. I'm Joe Santagato.
I'm Greg Dybec.
Just want to give a quick shout out to all of our patrons over at patreon.com/OPL show. If you guys sign up for the Patreon, you get bonus episodes and you get access to our Discord where sometimes you could talk to our previous guests.
Yeah, and we're going to jump right into this one today. We've obviously got a heavy topic to discuss. And, to be honest, I think in a sense, this is a conversation I haven't really been looking forward to. I think because, I know it's a conversation, and I think I could speak for Joe here, that is going to make us angry. It's going to make us sad, emotional, uncomfortable. But I think it's a conversation that we feel we have to have. And, I think our guest has a voice and a story that we want to offer this platform to, because we think it's important, that we hear from the victims, the targets of these tragedies as much as possible, not just, the politicians, the lawmakers, the psychologists, everyone that sort of weighs in when these atrocities happen. And with that said, we're going to be speaking about the Parkland shooting, which took place at Stoneman Douglas High School in Florida in 2018. It is the deadliest high school shooting in the history of the United States, surpassing Columbine. 17 people died, another 17 were injured. And it's, of course, one of the country's most publicized school shootings. And I think not just because of the death toll that was involved, but because of the reaction of the students, the way that they were able to kind of come together on a national level to express their anger, their grief, push for real change, to gun control, school safety, and things like that. So today we'll be speaking with one of the students from Stoneman Douglas who was there during the shooting. So thank you so much for being on the show today.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, totally. And, we obviously really jump right into things with this show. And, we kind of thank you in advance for your kind of telling of this, to relive these events, to be able to, sort of express it to us. So can you really just walk us through that particular day when the shooting happened?
Oh, yeah, sure, of course. All right, so it started... it was Valentine's Day, right? I think it was a Wednesday. And I don't remember a lot leading up to the events, like the day before or the day during. I don't remember a lot of that. I just remember like 20 minutes before and then like 30 minutes after I left the building, and then that's it. So what I start to remember was I was in fourth period, which is our last class of the day. I was in study hall. We weren't really doing anything. And two of my friends, Luke and Martine, they asked me if I want to go to the media center with them to just like play games on the computers or whatever, because we were just bored. We weren't doing anything. And so I say no, I'm fine, whatever. And then 5 minutes later, I change my mind. So I go into the hallway and I go to meet with them because they're already there. And I see my friend Enzo in the hallway. And so I start talking to him, and eventually he tells me to come up to his classroom. So I go up to his classroom, and he has a sub or whatever, so he doesn't care. And so we're just hanging out in there, and then the fire alarm goes off. And I wasn't with my class, so I wanted to make sure I was there because I didn't know the route we were supposed to take or whatever. So I was the first one out of the class, first one in the stairwell with this other kid. And then we hear this like banging, like a couple bangs. And some kids thought it was like balloons popping. Some other people thought it was like firecrackers or something. We didn't really know what it was. But in the back of my head, at least, I don't know about everyone else, but in the back of my head, I was like, is it a school and then I was like, no, it can't be. It can't be. So I turned back to my friends and I'm like, what do you think that was? Like, that's weird. I don't want to go down there. And then the banging just gets really loud and it sounds like it's a lot closer and everyone starts to run. And so, everyone just starts to sprint. I remember one teacher was screaming, like, everyone stop running. And I was thinking, like, I'm sorry, I'm just going to keep going. Like, I couldn't care less about what he said. And so I see my friend go into this one classroom. So I go into that classroom because that's the procedure, the code red drill we've always practiced. So I go into his classroom, and luckily I was there with a lot of my my close friends. So that helped me, made me feel like a little bit more safe. And then so everyone got into the room, and everyone piles on top of each other. We're in this corner of the room behind the teacher's desk, and there's maybe 40 kids in like a 8 by 8 foot like square foot area. And so I have like 3 people on top of my legs, but we just had to go through it. I had 3 people on top of my legs for like 40 minutes, I think. And it was killing me, but it was like the last thing I was worried about, you know? And so we're all in there, and we hear like shooting outside for the next 5 to 10 minutes. And then it gets a little quiet, and we hear like a banging on the door. Someone's banging on the door. And so we're obviously like, yeah, we're not going to answer that. But some kid gets up and goes to answer the door, and we like pull him back. We're like, "What are you doing? Like, like what are you thinking?" And he's like, "Oh, I don't know the door." I don't know. That still baffles me to this day what that kid did. But yeah. So we're outside, or so we're inside, and maybe like 10 minutes pass, and it's now quiet, and we'd hear the occasional screaming. And at the time, I didn't know if this was like the shooter who was just like fucking crazy, or if it was kids outside, like asking for help. But we couldn't do anything. Even the teachers, some teachers had kids like bleeding out in front of their doors, and they couldn't open the door because it was against like code and everything that they've been told. And I don't know. I'm not saying that's wrong or right, but it's just a shitty situation to be in, especially for the teachers. Because I remember my teacher. She was. Some of the kids were calming her down because she felt responsible for all these children, but she couldn't do anything about it. And so, it was very hectic in there, especially for the first 10, 15 minutes. And so we're stuck in this kind of like limbo where we're just sitting there. We don't know what to do, what's going on. And then all of a sudden we hear this staggered breathing from behind us or something like that. And we're like, what's going on? We turn and we like pull some kids off, and we see this kid. He's upside down, passed out, and like could barely breathe because he was just we were all piled on top of each other. We like shook him. He didn't know what was going on or anything. So yeah, it was kind of crazy in there. But we all, at the same time, we all had to be quiet, and we couldn't say anything, or we couldn't some people called the police.
As you guys are, in the classroom and you're hearing this banging, at what point did it kind of hit you that like, oh man, there is a school shooting happening here? It's not balloons. It's not, whatever you thought it was. Like there is actually someone in the school with a gun.
Yeah. So, like I said, at first it was kind of like I had in the back of my head, but I was like, what are the odds? And even when I was running through the hallway with everyone else, I was still thinking like, oh, we're probably overreacting here, and it was something else, just because of like the odds. I couldn't wrap my head around it. So I just had to think it was something else until we were like in there for maybe like 10 minutes, and then you hear like the screaming and more shooting, and then you're like, oh yeah, I'm here. This is where I am.
Did the shooter ever come down the hallway where your classroom was?
Yeah. I think that was, I guess it was him who banged on the door, who tried to get in. I'm not sure, but I assume it was him. And then they released this video footage of like this map of where the shooter was in the building. So we do know he like walked by like all the classes and stuff like that.
Wow. So you know for sure that, he passed by.
Yeah, definitely.
So, okay, so you guys were in there. How long were you in the classroom for before you were out?
I don't remember exactly, but I'd say like probably 40 minutes to an hour and a half, like around that time we were in there. But it felt like 3 hours, of course.
Oh, I can only imagine. And I think also, to Greg's point, in the beginning where he was saying that this has been one of the most like covered school shootings of all time. I also think that's because a lot of the kids nowadays have phones and stuff. Because I remember seeing videos of, people in classrooms just like, either like live streaming or just like sending Snapchats or whatever to each other of these things. Was that did you have any sort of people in your class doing that?
Well, he never the shooter never really entered our class, so there was no reason to like pull out a phone or take a video, or at least
Right.
nothing that I saw. There was only a couple videos that came out, but I remember at the time my phone was dead. So I like, and a lot of people at this time they're texting their parents like that they love them and stuff. And my phone was dead, so I had to get like my friend to text my parents that I'm okay and I'm alive and that like I love them and stuff. So I think that's what most of the kids were doing with their phones. And even after I like saw the videos and I was kind of thinking like, what are you like? I don't know. I was like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's something I didn't agree with, but I mean, it helps in a way just so other people can see how fucked up it is to be in that situation.
What is the level of fear at that moment when you're in the classroom and starting to realize, okay, this I can't pretend this is something else anymore. There is someone shooting outside of the classroom, and odds are that my classmates, potentially my friends, are dying right now. Does that fear? I mean, what is that level of fear? Like, was everyone panicking in the classroom? Did you really feel like you needed to say to your parents, I love you because I might not make it out of here? Or is it just kind of like survival mode that kicks in?
Well, okay, so a lot of people had a lot of different reactions. That's one thing I noticed. Some people, like one kid I remember behind me made like a joke about like how he was like, "Oh, I hope I can still make it to practice tonight." And I was like, "Oh, that's interesting. Like you're taking it that way." And then, other kids were like bawling their eyes out. Other kids were taking some people, like mostly some of my friends, they were taking care of other people, making them feel better, and that made themselves feel better. And just for me, I was sitting there, just reeling of what I've like been through in life, and because I was think I the biggest fear is like the fear of unknown, and I had no idea what was going on. So all I could know was that guy was just opening up every classroom and just killing everyone in the classroom. So like worst in my head, I was thinking worst case, I'm dying. So I literally was just reeling over the stuff I've done in my life, thinking about the stuff I haven't done in my life because I was a freshman at the time too, so I was even younger, and it for matters of fear, I kind of didn't feel fear. It was more just like a numb feeling. I don't know how to describe it, but I felt more like frozen.
Interesting.
Because I knew there was nothing I could do, and I don't believe in like God or anything like that. So I was just thinking, well, shit. I hope I get lucky. Like that's what I was just thinking in my head. Like, let's hope I get lucky, because that's all I can hope for now. Because I couldn't run. You can't really hide behind anything.
Yeah.
So just
Was there a point where you were running through the halls where you're like, I'm just going to get the fuck out of here. I'm not going to a classroom.
well, the way the building works is that there's 2 stairwells and then 3 stories, and so there's only 2 exits from the building. So the shooter was in one stairwell, and then there was another stairwell on the other side of the hall or side of the building. And so it's either I run down there, and I can either like risk. I don't know if there's other shooters. I don't know like what. I don't know if he's downstairs. I don't know which stairwell he's in. I can either go there and risk it, or I can go with the procedure and what school has told me. So I went into the classroom, but the people in the other buildings, they just left school because they could, because we have an outdoor school. But so yeah, mostly if I could have run, I would have, but I couldn't really.
Yeah, it's just crazy to even think about just that practiced kind of, I guess you called it code red, where you're trained, you guys are trained for this, and that's what always blows my mind. Obviously, you're a lot younger than us, and for I think us, like Joe, if we were to go through this, like Columbine happened in 1999, but it wasn't the same frequency, I think, of school shootings. So we didn't have that. We didn't have like hide under the desk, practices. At least I didn't, where I was. And it would have been so hard to fathom, like that a school shooting's happening. But I guess you growing up, and your generation, that is part of going to school. Like that reality is part of going to school, and that's terrifying that you have to prepare for that, and it's sort of always in the back of your mind, and then for you to actually have to then put that into practice because the real thing is happening. It's just I guess just being older, and with my school days behind me, it's just crazy to think about what that environment is like now, where again you have to practice this and know that every day I walk into school, this is a possibility.
Yeah, and it was a very weird realization for me because I remember after it happened, like the day it happened, when I was going home or whatever, trying to go to sleep, I was thinking, or when I was in the building, I was thinking like it didn't seem as big of a deal as I thought it would be. In that sense, I mean, as like a national news story, I thought it was just, oh, this is another school shooting. And I think that's the worst part about it, is that I wasn't even like, I was surprised by how important it was. Like I didn't realize how big of a deal it was because I'm just so, I guess, desensitized to hearing stuff about like school shootings and stuff. I viewed it as like, oh, okay, this thing is happening to me. Like, oh, I guess I was unlucky, instead of like, oh, this horrible thing happened. Who would have ever thought to do such a horrible thing? It was more of what I said earlier.
Eventually you ended up like getting out of the classroom. Like, can you kind of go through what that was like? I'm assuming like the cops show up to the door and then, what happens from there?
Yeah, so I remember when I was in the classroom, I was just waiting to hear sirens because I knew once there were sirens outside, then like there was some sort of protection. Because until the sirens came, he could still be in the building. Like we had no idea what he was doing. So I was just waiting for sirens, and then we heard the sirens, and I thought like, whew, okay. And then I got 10 more minutes, whatever. And then so eventually the SWAT team, they like bang on the door. SWAT team open up, and they tell us they're like screaming at us to get into some like this sort of like conga line formation, where like hands on shoulders. And he told us, look straight ahead, like don't look down, don't look to the side, look straight ahead, because he didn't want us to see all the shit that was going on in the hallway. And so I remember thinking like, it's kind of a weird thought, but I remember thinking like, I'm gonna look. I don't know what made me or whatever. I was just thinking like, well, like I'm here, I'm gonna look. And so we come outside, and there's this white powder that's like splashed like across the floor. I'm not sure. I don't know whether it was the gun or the fire alarm or whatever. But and then I see the bodies. They dragged the kids' bodies like to the side, and like almost just like push them, like prop them up, like on like by the wall or whatever. And you could see like streaks of blood on the floor, stuff like that. But that wasn't even like, for me. I don't look back at that moment in like horror or like, oh my gosh, how did I view this? What, it was just almost normal to me. I was kind of like, okay, yeah, that's what a dead body looks like. It didn't affect me as much as I thought it would. Like, you know how you see in movies, they'll like see a dead body and, freak out, whatever. It just didn't happen to me. And so, we walk out, and I step over this backpack, and I remember thinking like, who leaves their backpack, like whatever, blah, blah. And later I find out that was the shooter's bag. He had his AR-15 in there, his hoodie and everything, and he just left it on the stairwell. So I thought that was interesting. And then, and then we leave, we get out of the building, and I see just hundreds of cars, news reporters, like fire trucks, people like waiting, all this happening. And, we kind of just, I walked home. My mom picked me up, and, I went to bed.
I love how you're saying this like so nonchalantly. Like,
it's the reason why I'm so nonchalant about this is because I think there's like 2,000 kids in my school, or at the time at least 2,000 of these kids did this with me. Like I went through the same experience as them. So all my friends have a similar story to me. So for me, this is just a normal thing. And I know that's horrible to say, and I hate how it's normal for me. but I can't help it.
No, I understand. I mean, people have different reactions to these sort of situations. Like, especially, I mean, you described it perfectly when you were saying how you were in the classroom and you weren't really terrified. It was just more of a numb feeling. So it makes sense that, when you see basically the ramifications like of a school shooting and like the evidence of it with these bodies and everything, that there isn't really something that sticks out, because it's kind of like this numb feeling that, I mean, I'm sure it has to do with something like your body's sort of defense mechanism of being like, I'm just numb right now. It's sort of like protecting yourself from this sort of thing. And yeah, so I mean, some people are affected by it in a way of like it's horrible and they can't look and they refuse and whatever. But I think it's interesting that you kind of described something that I also like know about, that there are people that I know that have those kind of defense mechanisms where it's like, I don't really feel traumatized by this. I just kind of feel like this numb sort of feeling.
Yeah, exactly. I think you put that in a perfect way.
Yeah, I don't think it's not horrible to say. I think what's horrible is just the reality, like I was saying before, that you're almost desensitized to it before it even happens.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was trying to get at. I didn't mean by me saying it.
Yeah, no, and that's the sad reality. The same way that we're desensitized if the news came on right now and there was a school shooting somewhere, it would be horrible and we would have reactions, but we'd be lying if we said that we weren't numb to receiving that type of news, because it happens so often in this country.
Mm-hmm. And also there's other stuff like my friends Luke and Martine, who I was going to go to the media center with. I found out like on their way back in the media center, or on their way back from the media center, they died. And so there's stuff like that where I literally think like, should this bother me more? Like, should I like why am I so just numb to everything? That's really, I was almost surprised by my own reaction after everything happened.
Wait, so the two kids that you were going to meet up with and then decided not to, they ended up dying?
Yeah, only because I saw my friend Enzo in the hallway.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's stuff like that you think of, or you could think of, and I have thought of it. Like, what if I could have died with them, or if I went with them, I could have saved them. But it's thinking like that which really puts you in a hole, and I wanted to stay out of that type of thinking.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think thank you for being real. Like, I don't think anyone's going to hold that against you. We sometimes obviously can't control how we react to these things, and it just seems like you're being real about it, and we don't know. We can't judge because if we haven't been in that situation, how are we supposed to know? But with that said, it's a terrible situation to be in. Obviously we're extremely sorry that this happened to you. And, I guess that you sort of answered one of the questions I was going to ask, which is, did you have friends that, you lost or were injured or killed in this? Were there any besides just those two?
Well, I'd say those two were like, I wasn't so close to them, but I'd consider them friends. And then I think it was 7 people who were in my class, or at least in one of my classes, who passed away. Because it was the freshman building, and I was a freshman at the time. So most of the classes and most of the people I knew were freshmen. So the freshmen were going to know more people who passed.
Did you know the shooter?
Yeah, I was going to ask if there was any...
My sister, she went to school with him, and they always just viewed him as like whatever, that kid's a little weird. But I mean, she never said, like, no one really, like, I don't think bullied him or anything that was like noticeable. But it was just a weird kid in my sister's grade. That's all he was before.
Jeez, dude, that's wild.
So young too. That's what I'm still trying to wrap my head around, is that type of experience at that age. How old are you when you're a freshman?
I think 14. 14?
Like,
yeah.
14?
Different. I think.
Yeah, you're like 14, 15, something like that.
Yeah. Jeez.
So, I mean, I was going to say, like, afterwards, like, you're home now, and, like, you have that day. What is the aftermath of all of this? Like, how does life go back to normal? Like, how long does that take? Like, is there any sort of lasting impact that you think this has on you?
Yeah, definitely. But there's some stuff where I'm still trying to figure out, like why or like how this affected me. So I'll view aspects of myself that like have changed or whatever, and I'll think like, is that? And some stuff I'm like, is that because I'm just getting older, or is that because I went through this experience? You know,
What
and
what's an example of that? Because that's interesting.
Well, okay. So one thing I used to have when I was younger, I used to have a lot of like fears, just like fear of spiders. I had a big fear of heights, a lot of that type of stuff. And then after the shooting, I remember I had zero fear of heights. I don't care about bugs that much either. I just remember I didn't for like at least a long while. I didn't really have any fears, including like death too.
Right. Well, I don't see how this doesn't force you to mature and grow up probably faster than the average person your age. I'm sure, obviously, in different ways for everyone, but I would think it's impossible not to after going through something like that.
Yeah, and I'm still even realizing slowly how big of a deal it was. Like every day, I'm like, hold, like I went through that, and it's so just normal to me because everyone that lives around me went through the same experience. Like the town went through this thing, and I'm in this town, so it's kind of hard to see how crazy it is because I'm so used to it.
Yeah, and I think that's the kind of other side of this story, and what was so interesting, and what made it even a bigger deal in terms of being publicized was the student body, I think, coming together after, and so many of your classmates becoming national figures and spokespeople, even as high schoolers, for change, and it was grieving, but we also saw kids, really smart, intelligent, brave kids like yourself that really came out and weren't afraid to kind of demand change, and ask the hard questions of why do these things keep happening and how many more victims are there going to be. So what was that like for you to, be part of that community that was affected, and then in turn, spoke up and made sure that this got so much attention?
Yeah, well, okay. So I say how since everyone went through the same thing, it makes me very desensitized and all that stuff. But at the same time, it helped like tremendously because I remember the day after the shooting, we held this vigil, and it was where the whole town came together at this our local park, and we just held like a ceremony for like everyone that died. And I remember that was my first sense of community that I felt like in my life, really, because I've never been a part of something, just because I'm so young. And that community really helped. And you see people fighting for you and for a cause that ruined or potentially ruined your life. And so it was really, it gives you a source of strength seeing everyone together, because you don't really see a lot of people in one place agree on something. And so that was kind of a nice thing. Like after the shooting, it didn't matter about like your relationships with other people before, whether you like them or dislike them. Everyone was like together. So that was something that was extremely helpful in my healing process. And in terms of the political side, I didn't really get involved, and most of the people I knew, because we were younger, I guess, really get involved in the politics side. I kind of watched it from the sideline, but it didn't really um, move me too much, if that makes sense. Because I remember at the vigil, I saw all these cameras, everyone like getting interviewed and all this media attention, and I was just thinking like, this, no one's gonna remember this, or people remember this, but the in a month's time, the next thing is gonna move on, or the next thing's gonna happen, and that's what everyone's gonna focus on. So I didn't want to be defined by an event that happened and by some fucking crazy kid. So I didn't join too much in the political side, and I decided to focus more on healing with myself, and that I think really helped. Yeah, that really helped me a lot.
How do you like? Can you kind of describe like the first time school opens back up, or like you go back to school? Like, what are you kind of feeling then?
Yeah, so I think we had a 2 or 3 week break between the shooting and like the first day of school. And the way they did it is they kind of eased us in. They made us wear like IDs, and we had to wear clear backpacks at least until the school year was over, just to so we can continue with school. Uh, but a lot of people didn't want to go to school. A lot of people weren't done grieving, but everyone does it at a different time. So I understood why they like opened school back up, and they kind of eased us into it. The first week, it was a lot of like there were a lot of like therapists and social workers just there to like make you feel better. It was like almost going to like a 6 hour therapy session where you'd go to school and everyone's really nice, and there's dogs you can pet and stuff like that. And then the next week, I think we started playing cards and stuff like that. And then eventually we slowly went back into school. I mean, I don't know how else to describe it.
Yeah. No, again, like, thanks for being so real about this. It's like this perspective is interesting, because it's, obviously you can't speak for everyone. It's a huge school, but, just to hear your journey and your personal process to heal, to process all these things that kind of happened to you. And, I think that's a really good point about the community. I think, to see the positive in that, is huge, because those moments are so rare. And I had something, I don't want to say similar because nothing close, but in middle school, someone who was kind of friends with like everyone in the school, and I went to a big school too, ended up dying in a hit and run, and we had something similar with a vigil, and it just from that day to the end of high school, it's like it just took something away, like the no divisiveness, race, class, anything that like people could use to classify others, it just kind of disappeared in a way. And it was, a really cool experience in that sense. And I'm sure for you to experience that on that scale, in a diverse school with so many people, there is something really, beautiful about that, to be able to be brought together, and just kind of all mutually understand, that you're just humans.
After it happened for the first day, it was kind of like it didn't feel real. I remember waking up the next day, and I literally woke up and I said to myself, I was like, fuck, I really wanted that to be a dream. Like I remember thinking that when I woke up. And we went to the vigil and everything, and there was one point in the ceremony where they said everyone's names, like the victims that passed away. And so there was this stage and then a whole crowd of literally the whole city. And each name that they said, you can hear different, like louder cries from different sections of the crowd, and you can see like who knew who and everything. And I'm not sure if everyone else felt this way, but for me, when I heard those names, it was then I realized like this isn't going away. Like this was something I have to live with for the rest of my life. And that's when I realized like these kids are gone, and this is something that's going to affect me, and it's just something I have to live with.
What kind of ways do you think, if you can pinpoint it, do you think it affects your day to day, if it does?
Well, I always thought about this, and just like a little test in my head or whatever, but I don't think I've gone a day without just acknowledging that I was in this shooting. Like, I don't think there was a day where I just completely forgot. And I was like, oh wait, that because every day you're either going to school or you're whatever, you're just seeing stuff that reminds you, and it's not like it's just like a random thought, but it's for like day to day activities. Obviously, the first couple months it affected, but now I'd say everything's back to normal. As much as normal can be. But it's kind of this weird thing where because I still have this experience that I'm with, but everyone else has moved on, in terms of like the world has moved on. So that's something that I needed to. That's when I realized how badly or how important it was that I moved on from this instead of letting it define me or being known for it. And so that's why I don't think it affects my day-to-day activities, just because I try not letting it affect my day-to-day activities. There's occasional stuff where, like someone drops a textbook and, everyone flinches in the class. But besides that, like I can still go to concerts. I can still play Call of Duty, like that type of stuff. It doesn't bother me.
Well, that's good to hear. And you're still attending the high school, right?
Yeah, we're doing online classes right now, of course, because of COVID. But yeah, I'm still going there. They just recently put up a new building, which was in replacement of that old building. And so they had this whole opening ceremony. I think it was yesterday they actually had it.
So is there kind of an interesting dynamic now that I'm assuming now there's people in the high school with you that didn't go through this? And it's just kind of now, does that make you realize like, okay, time is passing on and then soon enough, everyone who's in this high school will not have been there for that event?
Yeah, that's something I thought of almost right away, because I remember walking through the hallways and thinking like, this isn't going to last forever. Like I'm not this community or whatever. It's not going to last forever. And that was a motivator for me to move on. Every year you'd see new kids come into the school, and it's unfair to look at them and be like, you don't know what we went through.
Right.
But it's hard to look at them and say we're the same as me and my other friend who went through this experience. So it's weird like that, but I mean, it's just something we have to go through. Everyone's going to go to a college. Everyone's going to go move, and eventually they're going to live with nobody that went through this experience. And so that was the biggest motivation for me to move on as quickly as I could.
Yeah.
Is there, I mean, this might sound like a weird question, but, I think with every tragedy there is, some sort of, I don't want to say silver lining, but is there anything that you kind of take from this experience that you think it's sort of like changed you for the better moving forward?
Yeah, definitely. I hear this from most of the people I talk to about this, and a lot of them say, obviously they're not glad it happened, and I think it's hard to put it in a way.
Right.
And I think the best way is you've accepted that it happened, and I think accepting it is when you can start to grow from it. And that's what I try to do from like the beginning, because I didn't like therapy or anything like that. It just wasn't my thing. So I had to figure this stuff out on my own, because my parents, they didn't know what they're doing either. But most people that I know say that they've changed better from the shooting, either that they care about life more, or that they chase their dreams and stuff like that. A lot of people that has been like a big deal for them, and they're almost like, if they could go back, they would change it. But now that it's already happened, we've accepted that it's happened, and
Right.
we're going to grow from it.
Yeah, it's insane. Not insane, but it's amazing how mature your outlook is on this. And just one, I think how well-spoken you are, how much reflection it kind of seems like you've done to heal, to think about this and to, like you said, accept it. And I mean, that's the best outcome, right? The best outcome is that one day the school is again filled with people who didn't go through this event, that your friends, that your classmates are off to college. Like, that is the victory, in a sense, that life does go back to normal. And I don't think that's a bad thing, because if it didn't, then the person who tried to hurt so many people, didn't just kill people, but affected so many others and prevented their life from moving on or things going back from normal. But to not give the shooter, that power where, things going back to normal is essentially the best possible thing that could happen. And, just speaking with you for this short amount of time, again, like I said, like, your outlook is so mature, so well-spoken. Like, I have no doubt your future's bright. And I know we've only been speaking for probably 40 minutes or something. But, it seems like you have a lot of good things ahead of you. And, I maybe part of that and, your defining character is because you went through this event, but honestly, also maybe not. But because like you said, it's not something that you're going to let define you. So, really, again, thank you. Just because it's amazing to hear from you, this perspective, this realness, was, really, really eye-opening, and we appreciate the honest conversation.
Yeah, of course. I really appreciate it for you guys letting me come on. Yeah.
Yeah, dude, thank you so much for coming on and talking. It's probably not, the easiest thing to talk about. I mean, I know you say that I know you're kind of like nonchalant about the whole thing, but regardless, it's a pretty wild circumstances there, so we appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, have a good one, and please keep in touch. We're curious. We want to know what you do in the future.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks, man.
All right, man. Have a good one.
You too.
Before we get to our final thoughts, we do have a sponsor for today, which is BetterHelp. BetterHelp is online therapy. So if you're, thinking about talking to a therapist, you can use BetterHelp. They have a bunch of means of communication. You can talk on the phone, you can video chat, you can text, and you can start communicating in just under 48 hours, which is amazing. So if you feel like you really need to talk to somebody or you want to kind of jump into the world of therapy, you can do that in just under 48 hours. Also, they make it very easy to transfer counselors or therapists, a very seamless sort of transfer there if you want to do that, because finding the right therapist is also part of the process. They have licensed they have licensed therapists that specialize in depression or relationships or anxiety or anything really that you're going through. They can find someone that, suits your needs. But yeah, BetterHelp wants you to start living a happier life today. You can visit their website and read their testimonials. But yeah, go check out betterhelp.com/OPL, BetterHelp.com/OPL. You will get 10% off of your first month if you use that, betterhelp.com/OPL. Again, 10% off of your first month. But yeah, there's over 1 million people who have taken charge of their mental health by using BetterHelp. I've gotten some messages from people who have tried it out and said that it works really well for them. So yeah, go check it out. If it's something that you're into, go to betterhelp.com/OPL. Man, that was some crazy insight on that situation. It honestly, like, to your point where you were saying, like, I feel like now we're like sort of desensitized to these sort of things, and I feel like subconsciously, at least for me, I try to, after a certain amount of time, I try to block those things out, because if you just like think about them and you harp on them, it's like really drives you crazy. And I almost forgot about this story and like what it means. And I remember watching, I would say, I think maybe last year there was some documentary on it. And that's when he was talking about like there was a map of like where the shooter was going. Like I remember seeing that and just being like, this is just wild. Like it's just wild, man. It's a crazy thing to go through. And I think it's a very interesting perspective for him to be like, he was just like super numb through the whole thing, because I feel like I've kind of felt that in certain situations. Not that I've been in a situation like that, but in situations where, a lot of people would panic or they would whatever, you just kind of feel like, I don't really remember how I felt. I just kind of felt this weirdness.
Yeah. Well, it's just real. Like you said, that's just, our bodies, our minds, like it's here to try to keep the status quo, right? It's like we don't walk around fearing we're going to die all the time, or like we block these things essentially. And that's like super real. It's like for him to not just to feel what he feels naturally and just kind of like let it come, like, and it doesn't seem like he thinks he's suppressing anything. It feels like he's just open to the feelings and his response to this whole thing. And like that type of honesty with yourself, I think is just, that's the only thing you can do, because like I've had it too. I mean, losing loved ones, like you don't always know how you're going to react, and sometimes sadness comes differently, or sometimes like I've even asked myself in the past, like, how come I'm not more emotional here? Like that's just the reality we go through when these like tragedies, small or big, happen in our lives. So it was really cool that he, was willing to be just really honest about that. He didn't dress anything up, or, he really just told it like it is.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's like I said, it's just like it's a wild insight, and I feel like it gives you a better perspective on those types of situations, especially because, I feel like how we feel about being desensitized to this, and I feel like a lot of people share that same view, where for a while there, it just kind of felt like, there was school shootings happening all the time, to the point where it's like, oh man, another hashtag, another tweet that you put out, pray for wherever. And it's terrible. And, I think it's important to not just read a headline and send your tweet out, but to actually, know and feel these types of things. Because, it'll change you, and it'll make you a more sympathetic person. It'll make you a more empathetic person as well.
Yeah, because it's in situations like this, it's so easy to immediately jump to politicize it, to talk about gun control, to there's a divide within politics and opinions, and
less about that, and it's more just about like human connection, and just these are humans, man, right, that we're talking about.
We can't forget the stories like his, like the people who lived through it and continue to live through it, and they just want a normal life. He's not thinking about that right now. He's just thinking about what college am I going to go to, or who am I going to prom with. Like, well, I guess no pandemic,
no COVID proms.
But yeah, and especially when you talk about this and school shootings, it's like these are not adults; these are children. Like these are kids, young adults. Like just for that to happen at such a young age is just so hard to imagine. But for him, to hear from him, like it seems like he and hopefully others in his position are, doing really well, and like that's all you can hope for. Yeah.
Wild, man. Well, obviously we thank him for coming on. Regardless of how nonchalant he is, that's a tough thing to talk about and sort of, relive, especially when you're on the path of growth and trying to just do your own thing. So we appreciate that. I feel like that's going to help a lot of people, like this episode, with, whatever. But for anyone out there who, if you have a story that you think will fit and be, something you want to share to our audience, don't hesitate to hit us up. Go to oplshow.com, fill out the form, send us an email. We go through all of them, and if it works, we'll schedule something and get to recording.
Yeah, and follow us on Instagram at OPL Podcast. We post clips, a bunch of other stuff. Shout out again to the Patreon community. We've got a lot of people there. If you guys want to know what episode's coming up, we now have behind the scenes every single week. So on Monday, you'll get a Patreon episode where we read the email and kind of talk about how we plan out, for example, this episode, some of the questions we want to ask, why we want to do it. And you get that episode before to prepare for the episode on Thursday, plus a bunch of other bonus content. So definitely check that out. Help support the show. And that is all.
Yep, that is all. See you guys next time.